Welcome to Space News Day 3. My name's Mike. I read the news about space so you don't have to. Let's jump into an Ars Technica article called Japan Becomes the Fifth Nation to Launch a Spacecraft on the Moon. This looks really cool. It's by Stephen Clark. It was written January 19th, which was yesterday. Japan. So after a successful landing, Japan's SLIM spacecraft stopped generating power. Okay, these articles always have really interesting titles and then subtitles. They're usually they don't seem to be related to each other, which I guess is the point. They want you to read the article they want to entice you to read the article so you go and learn more. So the Japanese Space Agency's first lunar lander arrived on the moon's surface on Friday, so that was yesterday, but a power system problem threatens to cut short its mission. So right now we're looking at an artist's illustration of the SLIM spacecraft, which has two engines on the bottom, slowing the entry of the SLIM spacecraft down with what appears to be a smaller craft, an independent vehicle on the left side here, not clear. So Japan's Robotics Smart Lander for Investigating Moon Mission, or SLIM, began a 20-minute final descent using two hydrazine-fueled engines to drop out of orbit. So that's interesting. They use methalox often for first stage and boosters. Well, just for the first stage of any sort of rocket program. And now we're seeing for this moon lander that they're using hydrazine fueled engines. I've never really looked too much into fuel types and why we'd use this or that, but I really do, at some point, I think that's a rabbit hole worth exploring. After holding to hover at 500 meters and then 50 meters altitude, SLIM pulsed its engines to fine-tune its vertical descent before touching down. So the Japan Aerospace Industry, or agency, sorry, streamed the landing live on YouTube. Kind of like someone else we know. SLIM aimed to settle onto the lunar surface adjacent to a nearly 900 foot or 270 meter, we're going to use meters here, sorry Americans, crater named Scioli. So I assume this is an interesting point. The moon has certain areas, geographical features, just like Earth. And typically those features on Earth are named by the country that presides over them. But on the moon, nobody owns it. So how are these? I mean, I assume, honestly, that it's just going to be whoever has the most technology and control of the moon's surface in the near future will essentially be, the names that they give those entities will become de facto. But curious to see how that plays out in the near, medium, and long term. Located in a region called, so Scioli is located in a region called the Sea of Nectar on the near side of the moon. I want to see what the Sea of Nectar looks like. Also known as Mare Nectaris, is a small lunar mare or sea located south of Mare Tranquillitatis. It looks like there are some images on Wikipedia. Okay, this could be a picture of the moon, or this could be a bunch of microbes. I really can't tell. Several large craters are situated at the border. And when they say sea, is there frozen water? Is there liquid water? Okay, so we have an oblique view facing southeast. Okay, yeah, really not clear from the Wikipedia article. There's a song called The Sea of Nectar, Ocean on the Moon already. It's a great choice. Beautiful name. Let's see what this article has to tell us about the Sea of Nectaris. I mean, nectar, so you would assume it'd be Nectaris. But English often doesn't work logically. So again, here's another view of the Mare Nectaris. It looks like an empty rock bed. So when I said, is it frozen water? Is it liquid water? it's very possible that it was just a crater that was formed by what could have been water in the past, and now we just know that water was there because of the elemental composition of that existing bed, as well as the geographical makeup. Obviously, the more that water runs through something, runs over rock on Earth, the more of a canyon that forms because water erodes rock. So facts about the Mare Nectaris: it's 360 kilometers, which would be roughly the distance between Boston to New York distance. Look at that, 346 kilometers. I'm good. I'm pretty good. I'm proud of that. So it's roughly the distance between Boston and New York. It's 3.85 to 3.92 billion years old, if you believe in that kind of sort of thing. And you can observe it with a 4-inch telescope. That's not that much. This 12-kilometer wide feature is easy to spot with a 4-inch telescope. Okay, I'm a little confused. So it says that it's 360 kilometers here, and then it talks about a 12-kilometer feature, which is this distinct crater well within its bounds, and this is called Ross, so this right here. So you can see that with a 4-inch telescope. That's pretty cool. Okay, back to the article. So Slim landed near a crater called Scioli, which, if we look here, is that pointed out? It's not pointed out on this other article, which is located in the Mare Nectaris. Very cool. So this is where the Slim is located, roughly. In what could be the mission's final hours, engineers prioritize downloading the data from Slim. Makes sense. Including imagery. I'm starting to imagine a Kerbal Space Program. You know, when you transmit data, you watch the battery, the energy bar, start to, well, I think it's the battery charge, but they have it represented as volts, which is quite accurate because as you start to discharge your batteries, the voltage level of your battery does drop, not to zero. And usually if you have like a 12-volt battery, as soon as it gets to something like 9 or 10 volts, you just say the battery's dead. But it will never go below a certain minimum. Sorry about the tangent. What was I talking about? Engineers prioritize that. This reminds me of Kerbal Space Program because you can see that bar start to go down as you transmit more data, and this is what they're experiencing here. So minimum success. Even if Slim falls silent, the mission has achieved its minimum success criteria. I mean, it did land on the moon. It is a technology demonstrator developed to verify the performance of a new vision-based navigation system needed for precise moon landings. Wow. Okay, so we've got the rockets. We have companies developing the rockets that are taking us into space. We have companies that are trying to help us transfer orbits. Companies like Momentous, which unfortunately isn't doing very well financially right now. We have companies that are very proficient with satellite development, Earth observation. Now we have companies that are working on the vision systems for precision moon landings. I love how all of the small pieces come together, and it's largely because you, as you know, anybody that's an up and coming engineer or someone that has extra time and the capability to do something, sees that opening, sees these small openings, and says, "I want to do that." And we need people like that. It's lovely to see. First and foremost, landing was made and communication was established. So a minimum success was made, in my view, says the Japan agency president. One of the core goals was to land within 100 meters of its bullseye. This accomplishment would be remarkable, a remarkable improvement in lunar landing precision. Interesting. So 100 meters is good, which typically is measured in miles or kilometers. Okay. I wonder what's more difficult, trying to the descent out of the moon's orbit, or so, you know, how do you plan your descent so such that you end up on this side instead of this side of the moon? So I wonder what's more difficult, the early stages of the descent or the actual maneuvering once you're within 2-3 kilometers. I assume the kind of more orbital trajectory component would be more difficult to get to precisely estimate. It would also be an enabling capability for future moon missions because it lays the foundation for future spacecraft to land closer to lunar resources such as water, ice. So there's water, ice in the moon. It will take about a month for engineers to fully analyze the data from SLIM. I mean, there are engineers analyzing it, but I assume there are also scientists involved. If it's video, visual data for landing, for like improving your landing ability, then I guess it would be engineers. But as you saw in the real-time data live stream, SLIM did trace the expected course. There was no evidence of damage to the solar array, which is one of the first things you would imagine would go in the case of a power failure. There are some other things that occur. You very often have high charge particles cause overcurrent, essentially false overcurrent signals on the bus, and so the element that's allowing or providing power, overcurrent, it hits an overcurrent, it turns everything off. When in fact everything was fine, there was no real overcurrent condition. It was a false alarm caused by a high energy particle. All other components of SLIM, including its propulsion, thermal, and communication systems, appear to be functioning well. That's great. So the spacecraft took a long route to get to the moon, trading time for fuel to preserve propellant. Okay, kind of like on Earth, if your car is driving slowly, you preserve your fuel longer. And it completed several maneuvers to settle into a low altitude orbit in preparation for descent to the surface. Where am I? Halfway through? So Japan is the 5th country, following the Soviet Union, the US, China, and India. But landing the moon is hazardous. The 3 commercial landers comparable to SLIM failed to reach in the last 5 years. One of those was developed by a Japanese company called iSpace. Most recently, Astrobotic, which is the company that launched on the Vulcan rocket not too long ago. They are on their way, but there was an issue with the second stage. So the first stage of the Vulcan rocket was successful. It got the second stage into space. Then the second stage had a fuel leak. You could see it from the bubbling on the spacecraft, the kind of the media, the image that's been thrown, splash all over the media. You can see the bubbling on the surface of the Astrobotic moon vehicle. So it attempted to send Peregrine to the moon, but there was a propellant leak. And after looping more than 200,000 miles into space, Peregrine re-entered Earth's atmosphere Wednesday, where it was expected to burn up 10 days after launch. A Russian lander crashed. The third problem was a Russian lander crashed into the moon in August, and India's first lunar lander failed in 2019. India tried again last year and made history when the Chandrayaan-3 safely landed. India has some fantastic space companies. We all know that they have a very intelligent population, and they do some great engineering work. So it doesn't surprise me that they're making big progressions and advances onto the moon. Japan's SLIM mission was primarily designed to test our new guidance algorithms and sensors rather than pursue scientific objectives. They said it cost them roughly 121 million USD. The spacecraft was modest in size, measuring 2.4 meters tall. It's 2.7 meters across, and its dry mass is 200 kilo. For a device that's that tall, that's actually a very reasonable weight. That voluminous, not tall. The start of the deceleration is expected to be breathless. 20 minutes of terror. Okay, so here's something about the technology. A new way to land. The spacecraft ignites its 2 engines for a retrograde burn to slow the lander's velocity. So retrograde is when your spacecraft flips in the opposite direction that it's currently traveling in orbit. And so if you're facing prograde and you apply and you turn on your engines, then your orbital altitude will continue to increase roughly. But if you turn retrograde and you apply force, your orbital altitude is expected to decrease until you reach a point where your periapsis, or the low point on your orbit, has your trajectory entering the, actually putting you on Earth or putting you onto the moon. So as it slows down, Slim flipped into a configuration to enable a top-down vertical final approach, similar to, assumedly, to what SpaceX does. Rocket engines are essentially nadir. Nadir's might be a way to say that, but normal to the Earth's surface. During this process, Slim's advanced guidance system received data from a landing radar and an optical rangefinder. So radar and optical rangefinder, cool. The lander's vision-based navigation system autonomously guided Slim towards its target landing zone. Engineer, I am starting to get tired, so let's try to wrap this up. Hazards, and also what time is it? Okay. They nicknamed the spacecraft the Moon Sniper. That's cute. So here we can see the two-step landing sequence for Slim. A brief hover over the landing site, followed by a 90-degree slip as the spacecraft settles onto the moon's surface. So it uses its engines to vertically approach the surface, and then as it gets close, but it is not necessarily touched down yet, it starts to tilt, and then it has a leg come out here, and then it slowly rotates over and falls eventually on its side, such that its engines are facing perpendicular or parallel to the moon's surface. If everything worked, these robots could have been in position to take pictures of the lander just as it reached the moon. Oh, there were robots and the lander. They're different. So, are we saying there are two different vehicles in this case? Jax calls the robots lunar excursion vehicles, or LEVs, which I assume one has a hopping mechanism designed to travel short distances across the lunar landscape. The other is a ball. Its design resembles that of a Transformer toy. Okay. And they had a toy maker partner with the space agency on this gadget. I love that. I love that. Just 3 meters over its landing site, Slim was supposed to briefly hold in a hover position, which would allow it to drop to the surface on the weight of 5 crushable landing legs. As Slim descends vertically downward, it is this back leg that first touches the lunar surface, as we saw. Turns at about 6 to 7 degrees. When the solar direction changes and when the light shines from a different direction, the light could end up hitting the solar cells. So they are holding on for hope that the batteries could eventually recharge, but it doesn't seem like they have a great idea as to what is currently going on with their vehicle. Slim was not designed to survive a cold, sun-free lunar night. All right, well, just crossing my fingers for you, Japanese Space Agency, and really the world. The more scientific advancement, the better, in my view. Anyways, thanks for sticking around. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and we'll chat on Monday. Bye-bye.